in a global and historical framework that's geared towards an actual transition from a capitalist fossil fuel epoch, a whole civilization, to a solar civilization based on commoning, prioritizing life, not profit. It has 5 elements or 5 dimensions. The first one is the hierarchy of labor power, where you have a class line, maybe the exploiters or 800 billionaires above the class line, the other 7 billion of us below the class line, the 1%, the 99%, if you will. And this 7 billion of us who are in the exploited category can be divided into men and women. Under capitalism, women produce labor power, and for no wage, or for $14 an hour, which doesn't wash. Right? So you have within this category of men, you have white men, usually monopolizing the salary jobs, and some of the wage jobs, you have black men. Under the gender line, you have white women and black women. And this hierarchy works to assist in the construction of many global for-profit value chains, and the resistance that comes up from below is focused on building alternative commoning, not-for-profit, for-life value chains. And within this hierarchy of labor power, we have 2 very interesting groups. One is what I call the male deal, which is a cross-class and often cross-race deal, usually between men, 99% between men, to facilitate the building of this for-profit value chain, and using sexism and racism to pump up the profits from the very bottom and from nature to the corporate bottom line of those 800 billionaires. And you have another very important group in this hierarchy of labor power, which is women at the bottom taking action to defend life. And it's usually, if we look at the instances of efforts to stop fossil fuel and uranium extraction, it's usually indigenous women, La Via Campesina women, unwaged women, housewives, the women of Quebec in all these villages saying no to fracking. It's women at the bottom with allies from amongst men who break with that male deal and will not participate in that male deal. So what do these 2 groups, the male deal and this ethnicized gender class alliance, fight over? This is the second aspect of the framework. They fight, I call it a fight for fertility, which broken down more is a fight for control over the capacity to reproduce and maintain life, whether plant, human animal, or non-human animal life. Fight for control of the capacity to bring forth and sustain life and to have access to the prerequisites of life, most importantly clean air, water, and food. I go on to the third aspect of this framing, which is the initiatives that you see with respect to the fight for fertility in 4 different sites. The site of production, where we see strikes, wage workers striking against the capitalists. The site of consumption, we just saw in California, a lot of people voting, 47% of the population voting to have GMO labels on their food. They lost that initiative. There was a big struggle which is ongoing. We have struggles, this fight for fertility at the point of social reproduction. We're trying to defend national health care in Canada. We're trying to defend free, high-quality public education from corporate capture. And finally, we have this fight for fertility, in particular at the site of nature. And here we think of the Niger Delta, where I worked for them, I guess from 72 to the present, in Nigeria, where we have women being very much at the forefront of that struggle, increasingly so. I go on to the 4th aspect, where you see at these 4 sites of struggle, production, consumption, social reproduction, and nature, you see a circulation of struggle. It's very similar to solidarity strikes. That is when people confront capital at one point in the corporate for-profit value chain, it weakens that chain, that global chain, and it opens the door for people to act in another place. And we do see this kind of boomerang effect, both horizontally and vertically along these corporate value chains and these integrated corporate operations. This is exacerbated, this is encouraged, this is assisted by what Marx, in chapter 32, volume 1 of Capital, called the imperative of large corporations to get bigger and bigger and more global, and in the process destroy and cause hardship and environmental degradation, but also to create a more and more globalized working class that Marx claimed was, by the very mechanism of the process of capitalist production itself, increasingly organized, united, and disciplined, and transformed into not just a class in itself, but a class for itself. And I think that were he alive today, he was talking about this back in the 1860s, so 150 years later we have a consciousness that I would, amongst people who see themselves as part of the 99%, who are focused on, especially the big banks, that are part of the petrodollar, weapon dollar coalition. That is the oil companies, the weapons companies, the military contractors, and the big banks. So, and I'm thinking very much here of this new social form that is the 99%, that is all the people who understand ourselves to be part of the exploited, and only about 20% of us in the world are waged, 80% of us are unwaged, the great majority of us are not paid salaries or wages. That this is a new social form that is capable of making this transition to a new kind of world. And the last element is the oil slave, that is the capacity to work embodied in a barrel of crude oil. And this is a different use of the notion of oil slave from the use made by Andrew Nikiforuk in his brilliant